presented by IAMAI and Accenture. Our next session is an expert's view on organizational and enterprise security. I would like to introduce you to the session moderator, Hemant Arora, partner, PricewaterhouseCoopers, followed by our panelists, Vinit Sinha, Director, Cybersecurity SME at Mastercard, Sridhar Sidhu, Senior Vice President and Head of Information Security Services Group, Wells Fargo, Mohit Kapoor, EVP and Group Chief Technology Officer, Mahindra Group, and Krishnan Venkateswaran, CDIO, Titan. A very warm welcome to all of you. Over to you, Mr. Arora.
Thank you, Jamisha. Hello, everyone. We are living through tough times. These are difficult times, and we understand that. I hope all of you and your near and dear ones are well, will remain well in coming days. We have to carry on with the work, and in that spirit, let's make the best use of the time we have. So without further ado, I will just give a little bit of introduction about the panelists we have, and then we will have some discussions around some topical topics. Feel free to post your questions to Jamisha, and we will park some time in the later part of the session for taking the questions from all of you. Welcome all of you again, and let me just introduce in no specific order. So we are joined with Krishnan Venkateswaran. He's a VP and Chief Digital and Information Officer with Titan Company Limited. He's an alumnus of IIT Bombay and IIT Calcutta, IIM Calcutta. And he's leading a very interesting initiative of Digital, which essentially combines the physical and digital products. It's a very interesting way of looking at how the world is transforming. So welcome, Mr. Krishnan. Now
Thank you.
Move to Mohit Kapoor. Mohit is an EVP and Group CTO for Mahindra Group. He has rich experience, 30 plus years, and have primarily worked with the banking sector earlier. He's also driving a very ambitious digital transformation agenda, which essentially will, take it to a new age customer experience. He comes with rich knowledge of mobile data, AI, cloud, and deep engineering areas. Hello, Mohit. I will move to Sridhar now. Sridhar Sidhu, but he prefers to be called Sidhu. So welcome, Sidhu. And he's a Senior Vice President and Head of IS Services in Wells Fargo. He also comes with a rich experience in FS sector, primarily in risk management and governance area. A regular speaker, I'm sure some of you would have interacted with him earlier. Hi, Sidhu. Now we'll go to Vinit. Vinit Sinha is the Director of Cybersecurity in Mastercard. He comes with a wide experience of info security, cyber, data privacy, risk management, and a wide industry experience beyond banking in telecom, automobile. He's also an advisory board member to EC Council Cybersecurity Certification and a joint secretary of ISACA Knowledge Chapter. So as you can see, everyone, we have a good panel covering various industry experience, various competencies. I, as a moderator, will try to make their job tougher by asking them tough questions, and I, will like audience to, be on my side and make sure we ask all the interesting questions from panel. Okay, so I will start the proceedings, and the topic, as Jamisha mentioned, is about the organization security, and I think the enterprise security has really transformed with the new working model, with the new normal, as we call it. We are in a zone where everything has to be available remotely, be it data, be it infrastructure. So my question to the panelists, and I will start with you, Krishnan, is that what initiatives you have taken with this new normal and what challenges you foresee? So Krishnan, over to you.
Sure, thank you. And let me start with just wishing that all of us are fine and remain fine. So last year, obviously, around the time March, suddenly all of us were on the cloud, right? And for years before that, most of us used to be on-prem, while our applications are a mix of on-prem and the cloud. And so being able to enable that access was obviously a challenge for all of us, and we are not the only organization who faced that. Luckily, we have been following a mobile-first policy for some time, and many of our colleagues have been equipped with laptops. So the problem was perhaps relatively smaller for us than perhaps for other organizations. And manufacturing naturally had to be shut down or scaled back. So there was really no manufacturing related work that could actually continue, right? But obviously being able to provide access, right? And I'll just come in a minute to the kind of things we did. And not only access, but also engagement. Because once meetings shift to a combination of people who work from home, then the dynamics themselves change, right? And so on and so forth. I absolutely don't need to repeat myself either to my co-panelists or the audience. We all lived through it, right? We have been taking security measures for several years, and many of them became immediately very useful, right? So, for example, cloud proxy. We had implemented that well before the pandemic. And so therefore, we were able to secure our individual machines, even though they were being operated from all over. And in fact, almost all of them from home. So to that extent, we were able to provision a decent level of end user security. We implemented a patch server outside our network and put the required configuration in every machine so that patching could continue. Obviously not as efficiently as before, but still not bad. We also faced the problem of keeping our data center up. And I must say some of our colleagues and service providers during those months did take the risk of coming to our office and ensuring that things were up. So very much my heartfelt compliments to my colleagues and service providers as well. There are some things that simply need people to land up, right? And we did have the folks who had the spirit to come in and take care of things. Besides that, single sign-on, granular access, we just sat and thought through everything that is possible and simply implemented it, right? So granular access, what it means obviously is when someone logs into the network, the person doesn't get automatic access to all services. Even those services get configured based on role. So we had to do all these things, obviously, to just keep increasing the level of security in a very different situation. We are on Gmail, so obviously Hangout and other services just came in. And I mean, the old joke about who did digital transformation across the world probably holds. I mean, we all just adopted e-meetings overnight, and the technology had been there for years but never used. So, you know what, I can go on. I would probably just cede the space to my co-panelists, two financial industry experts here. So I'm sure the B2C perspective, I would love to hear from them. We have also done many things for our customers as well, including video calling. A great deal of our sales last year originated on the digital front and then in the store. And there were many customers who bought purely based on a digital engagement. So obviously we have to implement ways of doing that securely as well. So many things worked, I would say.
Great, good insights, Krishnan. And I understand manufacturing company has a different dynamic than, as you said, the B2C. So
Exactly.
Mohit, you are running, as I mentioned, a transformation agenda, make it a very different experience for customers. And with this new normal, what were the initiative you took in your organization, and how these things are dovetailing the transformation agenda and protecting the organization in the new normal?
Thank you, Hemant. I think without repeating the employee-facing measures which Krishnan already covered, which we did as well, let me take the customer point of view. So the Mahindra Group is a diverse set of businesses, predominantly the SUV, the automobile, electric vehicles, tractors, real estate, logistics, holidays, finance, and used cars, amongst the top 7-8 large companies we have. Each one of them are conventionally physical and maybe phygital at the back end, or digital at the back end, but physical businesses with branches, dealerships, and storefronts as the main way for the customer to consume business. Right, last year, all of that had to quickly get digitized. So the acceleration of the last mile was the first thing we had to do, other than setting up users at home. And that changes the threat surface in many ways, because the threat surface earlier was very vertical, that if you were in a building and if you were an employee, or if you were in a storefront or in a dealership, then the border inside the dealership is kind of private. Now you could be anywhere, sitting anywhere. So the threat surface changed, it became a lot more horizontal. And hence, that's one change we had to make. And hence, that's where the zero trust architecture came in. So we quickly moved to a zero trust architecture for employees, for customers, for vendors. We also have a lot of vendors because, for making cars and tractors, or for making SUVs and tractors and electric vehicles, you have a huge supply chain with 1 million or odd suppliers, and many of them are online already, not to do with COVID, over the last many years. And it's an integrated digital supply chain. So I would say that the digital employee journey, the digital customer journey, and the digital supply chain had to be secured in quick 2-3 months of the lockdown. The good part is that that's put up ahead on overall data security roadmap by a couple of years. So that's one big change. Second change, I think the whole regulatory scene has changed too, not because of COVID. Anyways, it's maturing, right? So the GDPR has already happened. We also operate in Europe. The PDP, the Data Protection Bill in India, since you asked about challenges, I do see much of them coming, that how do we use data in the right way. And at the Mahindra Group, we stand for our purpose to do the right thing for our customers. In such case, I think for all CISOs and CIOs and CDOs and CDIOs, I read that for Krishnan, all of us will have to, the next step beyond the security is around the data privacy and the whole consent framework, that how are we going to make the right use of data. So I see those coming up. Surely the activity of the threat has become very, very high velocity. Every day there's something happening, and we need to figure out how to predict these better. But I think those are my views, that we have taken a customer digital, employee digital, and digital supply chain approach for security, multi-tier security architecture with a zero trust model. And I do see challenge a lot in being able to detect and prevent incidents, and also data privacy is a large new piece of work all of us need to get attuned to as things become more mature in the Indian subcontinent. So that's my view, Hemant.
Okay, thanks, Mohit. And I like the way you said the customer, supply chain, and employee. I think these are the 3 pillars or dimension, and it's fairly comprehensive if you look at it from 3 lenses. So Sidhu, over to you. Wells Fargo, a global banking provider. It's not only, in the new normal is different for different country also, and different stage we are in. So how you handled organization security in this new?
Yeah, thanks, Hemant. I know, first of all, a couple of caveats. One, need to say this, in every session, whatever I say here is based on my personal experience, not attributable to either my current employer or the previous employers. And, echoing with Mohit and Krishnan, I think we wish this is in a different times, less stressful, but wishing everyone to stay healthy. So as a global financial institution, Mohit, we are obviously very well regulated. So which basically means that the level of risk management and the security control rigor has to be already there. What changed probably post Feb, probably end of January last year, was the scale at which existing controls need to be enhanced to meet the whole spectrum of your entire workforce, your third-party service providers, and also we have a huge, thousands of branches where people come every day to do transactions, right? So how do we enable them to already existing digital channels? Those are the fundamental challenges. It's more about the scalability of existing solutions as opposed to building completely brand new from ground up. But the scale itself is very, very high, and it led to tremendous amount of coordination across every stakeholder, right? From risk to security to infrastructure, because many people used to work within the offices. So you need to give them, not everybody has got mobile laptops. So you need to manage all that while your control systems are already there. So that's the fundamental challenge. The second one is, being a financial services organization and a regulated industry, people who are working from the reasonable time, working from home or on the road, their level and training and awareness of security is different from people who work within the organization because their requirements are limited, right? So when you move that, entirely shift it to 100% working from wherever you are, that additional awareness to make sure that they understand the do's and don'ts. It's more of a human, communication challenge as opposed to technology enablement challenge. So those are the two we needed to, immediately address. And the third one, which started, I think, probably April, May timeframe last year, but blew literally out of proportion in December, is the supply chain risk management, right? And that will continue for the foreseeable future. So how we use different technologies and data science to predict, not just detect, to predict third-party supply chain risks is becoming extremely critical. Whether it is financial institution, as Mohit mentioned, they have 1 million, third-party, agencies are 100,000. I don't remember the number exact, but that's a big one, right? That's a big risk, right? The perimeter is no longer in your control, and then not everybody is at the same level of security, and the weakest link is one third-party service provider or a one employee working inside, despite the control. So third-party information risk management is also getting extremely critical. So those are the three things we focused on. Summary, enabling customers to go to digital channels, enabling employees and third-party service providers to work from wherever they are, and looking at third parties as an organization, their risk exposure. Those are the three things we mainly focused on, and we'll have to continue doing that.
Sure. Sidhu, I understand. We all know human is the weakest link, and we all understand that it is the most critical link as well. Technologies come and go. It's the human who drive the whole thing. So moving over to Vinit, Mastercard, it's a digital era we are living in, and no less than credit card companies who are really enabling this, right? So with this kind of new working model, new normal, how do you see, what are the challenges you faced or you foresee, and what initiatives you took in Mastercard?
So first of all, I hope each of the team members, the panelists, and the folks who are listening our conversation, I think hope they are safe and sound. Coming to your point, Hemant, I think you rightly pointed out, and I think Krishnan, Mohit, and Sidhu obviously covered some of these pieces in detail on the key initiative. And I think largely as an organization, we already had some of these pieces already there because of being heavily regulated into the industry from a financial standpoint. But 3-4 areas that we actually took as an initiative. I think Sidhu touched upon that point of supplier risk assessment. So I think one of an area that was very critical for us was supplier, because since we are globally connected with so many merchants, acquirers, issuers, it's important to understand their posture today because they are directly connected to our systems and infrastructure. So it was important for us to have a real-time view about some of the control environments. So one thing that we did was that we enabled a provision where we are able to real-time scan on their actual internet-facing application and systems. So we get a view about which are there any assets of their organization which are getting impacted by the adversary, and if in case something of that sort is happening, we are immediately alerted on that. So we first of all looked at some of those areas. The second piece that we looked at was qualitative risk analysis. Has been a journey which we have been doing over the last 10-15 years for ourselves. But to measure some of the real-time changes in the control maturity was very important. So we continue to do that risk assessment in a qualitative way. But what we enabled as an organization was to look at more from a quantitative risk analysis, which we can prioritize some of these pieces. So we immediately looked at methodologies and models where we can put it into the framework, in the larger framework we have across the organization, and break it into silos. So we eventually broken down the organization into different small pieces so that we can get a maturity view of each of the organization. So let's say if in case I have a small unit which is operating out of India, I get a visibility about how is the control maturity happening there. Then similarly, we get a holistic view of the entire organization, and we are able to identify, okay, what are those key controls which we need to put in terms of the investment, in terms of the maturity, and how do we enhance some of those. So that was the second piece that we have enabled in the organization. The third piece that we looked at and putting into the control environment was the attack and breach simulation. It's an important journey. Today, you do not know how the adversaries are going to actually impact your organization. How are they, what kind of methodologies they are going to use in terms of striking your infrastructure and which. So it was important for us to really have a day in, day out information about these. So we adopted a solution which would help us in terms of doing a real-time scan on our infrastructure. And the moment we see a port is opened or any control which is going beyond the expectation because of any change management in the organization, we are immediately alerted. So on a real-time basis. So those were the three areas which we, and again, I think Sidhu pointed out on the user awareness. I think that's an important critical aspect. It's important for the users to be aware about the kind of attack patterns. Phishing, you talk about wishing, smishing. I think these are multiple channels today because of the work in from home environment where employees are being targeted. Now, it's important for the employees to understand some of these basics in depth. And we try to run such kind of a simulation attack across the organization in order to identify who all are those vulnerable employees. And the moment we are able to narrow down, okay, through one of the assessment that, okay, we have 10 folks who are there, we immediately take these 10 people and provide an additional level of awareness and training. So I think these were largely the four major areas that we have focused. Obviously, digital transformation has happened. A lot of new frameworks have come into picture from a financial service organization. There is CPOC, the contactless payment over the mobile. So some of these pieces, and then most of us in the financial sector know that the HSM largely resides on an on-prem setup. And any application which you host onto the mobiles or on the servers, today that hybrid model largely does not work. So some of those analysis have to be put in through how we are going to place some of the infrastructure, how are we going to support the large environment that we are operating in. So that were the certain few 4 or 5 initiatives that we took as an organization.
Thanks, Vinit. I think if I paraphrase it rightly, I think prioritization and putting objectivity into the whole thing is very, very important. It could be through simulation, through analysis, because our bandwidth and our budgets are limited. Whatever they may be, they're limited. So we have to find a way to focus on what is critical for the nation and what is relevant, and address that first. So moving back to Mohit, when I think of prioritization and ensuring objectivity, two challenges come, and you are both leading a consumer side of it, consuming cybersecurity products and also enabling solutions for your end customer. So how do you decide, is a question in the chat window as well. What are the vulnerabilities I should prioritize? What is the thought process around it? And how do you figure out what are the right products? What will work for me? Because there are multiple options. Every day there is a new technology that comes in the market which claims that they will solve everything. So how do you figure out which are my priority risks and which are the technologies I should take to solve those risks?
Thanks, Hemant. Actually, the answer is more complex than the question, because we are also a large manufacturing company, because we make SUVs in 16 factories and tractors and electric vehicles. So I see it in 3 domains: the IT, the OT, and IIoT, or the IoT, as a part of Industry 4.0. And obviously, there isn't a security suite of products which can fulfill all of this. So the part of the question you asked was in the IT domain, which is the end user, and whether it's CASB or cloud security or whatever else, or DDoS or DNF or whatever we spoke about. Those are IT products, and selection of those are slightly easy because coming from a bank and having worked in banking, it helps. But the OT and IoT itself is a large area, because it's not hard to imagine attacks now to manufacturing companies, either to shut down the network or steal intellectual property, and hence they need to be protected too. So we are involved in all three of those layers. I think it has been a realization first that most of the security should sit in the cloud. There is no point buying things for on-prem, black box, or any other service. So that's one, irrespective of where whether you're doing IT or OT. Cloud security is better, cloud-based security is better. That's kind of first principle. That's a change. Maybe 2 years ago, if you asked the question, I would have answered it differently, but that's a realization quite upfront, and also a realization quite clearly that there isn't a one size fit all, either for IT or for OT, because of the complexity of the endpoint, cloud-hosted apps, on-prem apps, and the connected vendors and digital supply chains, and the non-uniformity of different things. And hence we have gone with a very POC kind of orientation to do rapid POCs to select which is the best of the breed product fitting to each of these controls, whether we putting the control on the endpoint for DLP, or putting a cloud proxy, or putting a MAM on the handheld device, or securing our factories from a firewall or multi-layer architecture. So it is indeed complex, because the security threat surface is multi-dimensional, especially for us, and I'm sure for Titan as well, quite similarly, because they also manufacturing. And there isn't a solution. Also, the old companies which had a suite of products, they aren't necessarily fulfilling all the needs anymore, and hence it's gone back to multiple vendors. The good part is that because of data and analytics, some bit of the prevention, detection, response, recover, they have become faster compared to old days. And I've been running info security maybe 20 years now. So compared to old days, that has become better, because even if the products and the controls, detective and preventive, are heterogeneous in nature, you are able to build a common data lake, or whatever you want to call it, a backend, where you can do your analytics, you can predict, you can do some retro and post both. But to your question, there isn't an easy answer to it. Cloud based is better, and best of the breed and prototyping, proof of concept is a better way to select what's suitable for your industry and your company, depending on what your threat surface is. So that's kind of my approach to it, and it's worked for us quite well so far.
Sure, I picked the two key messages, the cloud and rapid POC. That's very interesting to know. And moving back to you, Vinit, vis-a-vis, let's say, Krishnan or Mohit, where there is a different business verticals, and we talked about OT, IoT, and standard IT. The focus for a Mastercard kind of a company is primarily on the IT space, right? So does it make life simpler, makes life tougher? So how do you select the products for you? What is that magic mantra, if there is any?
See, largely our organization infrastructure and solutions are uniformly across the organization. So if in case we are going ahead, maybe the vendor or partner might be changing in some of these cases, but if in case we narrow down onto a solution that has to be implemented, it has to be done across the organization. Now, since Mastercard have a presence in across 180 countries, we have to very think through in some of these pieces. What are those solutions? How are they going to have an impact on our infrastructure and solution? What is the impact? And there are a lot of things other than only the solution piece that we have to look at. We have to look at the kind of people who are going to access that. Where is this information going to get available? Or what kind of controls are they? So if in case I'm putting up a solution, what is the challenge that? So I need to, as an organization, we need to reach out to each of these stakeholders across respective region to understand their need and how it is going to actually help in terms of solving some of their key issues. Again, as I rightly pointed out to Mohit, one solution does not fit all, right? So it's not necessary that if I have an XDR solution, is going to be applicable for Mastercard and equally for Titan and for Mahindra also. So you have to think through. You cannot just go ahead and blindly, okay, this is the product which I need to put in onto for my organization, I'm going to implement. You have to look at the implication. You have to understand the culture of your organization. You need to understand the environment you are operating, the connectivity from different sources, the people who are going to access some of these. So again, information is the key. You do not want to lose that information eventually, and you need to protect that. That's the objective. And we are handling critical data. The transaction data is that's something which we are handling on a day in day out basis, which is very critical. And the regulators are there sitting on top of it, who are monitoring it on a day in day out basis. So it becomes very. So again, to answer that question, you have to first do a deep dive analysis in terms of what the culture is, how the accessibility and other pieces are going to get impacted because of that. What is the problem that is going to solve eventually for you as an organization? And does that problem brings you another set of few problems for you? That is that analysis that you need to really think through. And then only you should go ahead and implement a solution in your organization. So that's largely been the approach. Again, many solutions do not happen in one go. So it takes years for us to really evaluate, think through before we go ahead and implement it.
Sure, Vinit. Though there's a question on data and information, I will pick it up later. And then good you attributed to that point, and there's a question already. And audience, please keep on sending questions via Jamisha on chat. So moving back to you, Sidhu, Vinit touched an important point of the depth of analysis that is required before you select a solution. And then, like I think Mohit mentioned, sometimes the question looks very simple, but to get to the right answer, the devil lies in details. In Wells Fargo, it's I can say a very well-known multinational. Lot of processes will be there, and you yourself come with a lot of rich experience. So is there a structured method to arrive at a particular solution or a product, or you take it on case to case basis? How do you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, you preempted everything, Hemant. So obviously, this being a global organization, not just Wells, any other global financial or other industry segment. What at least the ongoing pandemic taught and our thought is the importance of nimbleness. And particularly in financial services, the coexistence of financial organizations and fintech, the importance of coexistence is already well known. But luckily, in an unfortunate event like pandemic, this only made global financial institutions also a lot more nimble when looking at any solutions from a new control standpoint. And there are luckily large number of the security startups, which are their product roadmaps sometimes are as quickly refreshed as in a quarter to meet the new demands. That's number one, that is happening. The second one is that, as Mohit rightly mentioned, the complexity of manufacturing, third parties, and partly financial transactions. The IT infrastructure complexity is significantly high for that kind of an industry compared to maybe a financial services. I'm not downplaying that financial institutions, but the threat landscape is significantly high for financial institutions for the simple reason is everything you do is financial transaction. So people are either after money, or if somebody is in a critical manufacturing infrastructure, national, threat actors, maybe nation state actors will be after those industries. The complexities are different for different organizations. The nimbleness, as I said, is coming up quickly. Cloud, if people are already mid-sized industry players, cloud enablement is most effective, both in terms of efficiency of controls as well as cost of operations. If you're already a large organization, revisit your existing control solutions. And many a time, if people look back and see, sometimes without any evaluation, probably some products are already bought. Some of them not necessarily be implemented in large global organizations, but the money is gone in already. So look at the possibility of consolidating those legacy control systems with the latest, things like SASE, right? I'm not saying it is well proved right now, but it has the potential to reduce significantly the cost of operation, but at the same time enhance the security controls at various layers of defense and depth. So those are the things some mid-sized or large clients large organizations can look at. If you are good for cloud, go for it. I think there are enough cloud-based consumption of services which would give you the best of both worlds.
Thanks, Sidhu. I think, as you rightly said, that each organization either has a different risk profile, different kind of way the whole technology or security investments were made. And Krishnan, coming to you, interesting landscape, OT, IT, physical, IoT now coming up, and the coexistence of legacy systems and the new age systems. And also there are OEMs who are very close, won't have easy way to patch any OEM box. So the tricks in IT may not work in OT or vice versa. So how do you deal, if you have to choose a product, it is an organization level product or an enterprise level product, or you choose horses for courses?
Well, I'd like to add variables to that as well, right? So that's another area of consumer risk altogether, but I won't go down every route. So what we have done early on is to identify what are our crown jewels, right? Even in health, there is that concept of the blood-brain barrier, right? Anything that crosses from your circulatory system into your nervous system or your brain is likely to cause serious damage. And so the body itself has that blood-brain barrier built in, right, which makes it difficult for ordinary diseases to just cross over. So if you apply that principle here, all of us in our respective industries have systems that need to be protected more than the rest. I mean, some expense BPM, TKO, if it gets hit or goes down for a few hours, that's fine. Some bills will get processed late. But if, let's say, a loyalty system with 20 million customers data, hopefully by the end of this financial year, gets even touched, let alone damaged, we do have a much larger problem, right? And Mohit just spoke about the ethics of privacy, consent, not just the laws, but the sheer commitment that organizations like us bring to that topic, right? Irrespective of whether we are told to do the right thing, right? So we have identified our crown jewels or valuable systems early and put in controls around them, which include, for example, encryption and masking at the data level, privilege access management for even our own folks so that everything is tracked, right? And at the perimeter, obviously, far more stringent controls around these systems than perhaps for some others. We are also a hybrid organization. Our e-commerce and CRM are on the cloud. And obviously, we follow all the best practices around securing those systems and the pipe between the on-prem and the cloud, right? The way data gets transferred, our secure API implementation is very committed, very mature. And so our connection with marketplaces like Amazon, Flipkart, and others are all, from a security perspective, the highest order, right? And we are obviously extending that to our wearables business as well. The combination of the device, the phone, and the cloud. We are looking at the whole continuum from a security perspective. And so that's been really our philosophy, to look at what's valuable to us as a company and be able to localize damage, right? That's another important point. We, unlike, let's say, financial institutions, we operate on physical presence. We have 2,000 plus stores of our different businesses across the country. So we draw a perimeter around each store, and if there is an attack on the store itself, the damage is very limited to that store alone. And all the communication from that store to our main systems is via data flow APIs, which can be cut off. We are looking at POS, point of sale implementation on the cloud. And once we are far more comfortable with bandwidth provisioning within the store and latency coming to as good as a LAN implementation, then we'll probably go that way. Then the store becomes even lighter with respect to footprint than it is today, right? We are also looking at VDI. VDI, I think, would be native to all giant banks with many, many branches. But we are also looking at those use cases in the context that they'll work for us, which again lessens the spread out footprint and concentrates the security and the capability to a specific point, which can be then guarded well. We are also looking at geofencing. For example, a CRM application cannot be used outside our store because the system looks at lat long and simply does not open up if it is beyond the set parameters. So frankly, many techniques are available today. It's a question of knowing what you need to secure, have the priority as a discipline which is really speaking to your industry and your company, agree on it with your risk management committee, invite multiple views from stakeholders as well, right? We have a very disciplined process of conversing on security with all our colleagues. And it's not just one-way training from the InfoSec team in terms of phishing and compliance and mails, but an active discussion on security. And in fact, I'm happy to note, there's a general acceptance that unless the InfoSec team signs off a new launch, it doesn't go live. Simple. So if there was a mistake committed, there is a mistake committed. We're probably not involving them early, but all our business colleagues are totally on board with the process of InfoSec sign-off. And here also, just to add one last point, you have to choose what you should not do. I think Vinit mentioned about a solution to a problem bringing another problem also, possibly, right? So for example, we don't need to store customers' credit cards and other information, right? We are not an Amazon. People come to us to buy probably few times a year. And so the risk of storing customers' financial information is much higher than any benefit that we may gain from it, right? In terms of one-click checkout and all, doesn't really apply to us. So we are very clear. We are going to use payment gateways, and in that sense, customers' financial information will never rest on the Titan network. So decisions on what we should not do are also equally important.
Very
And
interesting, very interesting point that, in the world which is hungry to store customer information, there are choices you are making that you will not store information because as you said, the benefit risk equation doesn't match. So very, very interesting point. I did not expect it personally. And but Vinit, you don't have that choice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have to live by it.
You don't have the choice, and I will stop my questions and I will rather take the questions on the chat window. And the link question to this is that what measures you have adopted to ensure data privacy and security of your customers in post COVID era particularly.
So see, in the post-COVID era, data privacy. So since I talked about the multi-geography presence of Mastercard, and there are so many regulations which are there, there is again no one framework which will fit all, right? To every region, you have to manage a different committee, different set of regulators, and then to ensure that you are complying to some of those requirements. So if you look at Singapore versus the UK or versus the US, you'll see different regulations are there, and there are different requirements. So you have to read specific to the geography. I think one thing which I mentioned during the discussion was that we have a uniform control environment. So that helps us in terms of easing some of these pieces. But again, there are certain regulations, there are certain requirements which will say that, okay, you have to report some of the incidents directly to the data protection authority, but says you have to put it onto a DPO here, which is sitting locally in a state. So some of these compliances requirement have to be looked in through. And again, you have to deal it accordingly. But again, the incident response process or the incident handling process from a privacy standpoint, these remain standard across the organization. But again, yep, from a regulatory standpoint, some of these requirements have to be looked through precisely from that perspective.
Thanks, Vinit. And Sidhu, you are also in a domain where a lot of regulations you have to deal with, and even India is going to hopefully have its own PDP bill becoming a law soon. So, any other specific measure you have taken to protect data privacy, data security of customers, and how these measures have changed post-COVID era?
Yeah, so one thing is actually, Hemant, some of the global financial institutions see security, while is very heavy on the technology, also on business side. Privacy is something they will see heavy on business side, and they do make sure that the business enablement of privacy is very, very important, and organization constructs also would be like that. While there is a significant collaboration between security and privacy arguments. As you rightly mentioned, every country is going through their own, privacy protection laws. What's concerning personally for me is that across the world, everybody wants to be in the forefront of, I have the best data privacy policy, right? That said, which is fair, right? That said, there is an opportunity for a global minimum standards of privacy, right? And then on top of that, if somebody wants to layer it, that's a different ballgame. But if you don't do that, particularly with the amount of security events happening and every regulator having their own set of expectations, the overheads on privacy and incident response compliance is going to be more complex, more time consuming, and also more resource consuming, right? So my hope, for example, take the case of United States. Every state wants to have their own privacy laws. Can there be a federal law? Possible, right? Like India. India can probably piggyback on, again, this is my personal view, by the way. So there is an opportunity for global regulators to collaborate and agree on, like some of the G8s or G20s, they work on some national, international, matters of importance. Privacy is an international matter of importance, and I hope there is a motion to see a common minimum framework for privacy across the world. That's number one. Number two, if we really look at and peel the onion of every possible breach that happened in the last 10 years, including the mother of all breaches of December 2020, fundamental is hygiene, right? We keep saying as security people, hygiene is key, but that doesn't necessarily happen. And I always keep joking this. It's important to brush twice a day, but at the same time, it is also important periodically to floss your teeth. Just brushing is not going to help. Similarly, having a two-factor authentication would reduce the exposure nearly 90%. But how many organizations diligently follow two-factor and make sure that the two-factor authentication violations are monitored and reprimanded? So those are hygiene, collaboration with regulators to make sure that there is a common minimum framework. If you do these things, there is a better way of managing the information and privacy risks for any industry and any organization. And let me stop here and see how my other panel members have views on it.
Sure. Thanks, Sidhu, and good real life examples you gave of what is brushing and flossing. Since conscious of time, there are a few minutes left. I will take up the last question, which is on the chat window, and I think that with you can answer it best. With such a large employee population and sudden situation of lockdowns, people have to connect remotely. I know it would have been very difficult to arrange company-driven laptops or things like that. So, did employees connect on their own devices? And if employees are doing that, how do you enable security in that when the end device is not something is coming through Mahindra security checklist? It's actually procured by the employee himself or herself. So how do you enable security in that zone?
So I think it's a great question. You're right. I think we had only 30-40% users who had company-owned laptops, and they could go home and get started. We did go the BYOD way, and then quickly converted to WVD, Citrix, and a VDI to it, to say that using two-factor authentication, the home computer is only a gateway to come into the company network, but the information and data stays in the network. So we did start with BYOD, direct access to email, Office 365, but quickly converted to WVD. And we already had a Citrix farm, which we added on, and then also realized that the cloud options, including Windows WVD, works equally well. So with a mix of Citrix and WVD, we've converted the BYOD home computer users quickly into a VDI environment, and also expanded the laptop users. Looked at, because it's been on 1 year. So I'm only talking about the first 2 months. Through the year, 30% refresh anyways comes in. And lots of that refresh was for desktops which were ending life, or even laptops which are left behind in the office. So all upgrades hence have been to a laptop, so that more and more users, hybrid working is going to stay. That's how it looks like, right? So equipping more people with an endpoint, which is a better managed endpoint, makes it more functional. So that's one control. Second is around MAM. That also later, after a couple of quarters, we realized that on the phone, of which also it needed email access to Office 365, MAM is the ideal way to go. So putting a UEM and a MAM security on the phone in a container are two things we have done, where the phone may be personally owned, or your home computer may be personally owned, and it is. The information and data is secured with the company, either in the MAM on the container or in the VDI or WVD back in the company. So that's our strategy, and it's worked very well. It's highly functional also. Actually, it works quite well, and that's how it's worked from a balance of security, productivity, collaboration, and communication, which has been the main bedrock of how last 1 year has worked for all of us. I think Office 365 and many other cloud-based products, or even WebEx for that matter, have helped and kept things running. And the good is that they were already in the cloud, not a video concentrator sitting on-prem. So those were quickly adopted, which I'm sure, is equally valid for all the companies here. But thanks for asking the question.
Sure. Thanks, Mohit. And since we are out of time now, I must conclude also. So a lot of good key takeaways. I think times are uncertain, and hopefully not, but they will remain uncertain for time. And I think as security professional, we have to be agile. I think that was the clear reflection. We have to adapt on how how the whole environment around us is evolving, and still ensure that security basic hygiene is so it's a tough battle. It's a 24/7 battle. It's not a day window battle only. So all the best to all of you. Thanks to my fellow panelists. Great session. Good learnings I had. I'm sure you would have taken notes. I will pass it to Jamisha now, and we can conclude the session. Jamisha.
Thank you, dear panelists, for joining us today and sharing some valuable insights. We truly appreciate it. I would like to thank our partners, Accenture, Automation Anywhere, Route Mobile, and Tata Teleservices. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with our next session in 10 minutes. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.